Hello parents. So in the spirit of this remote learning, I'd like to shoot a video basically explaining how your child's physics class is going to work. So here's a really quick overview. You can think of it kind of like a virtual syllabus. So a lot of students, when they first start up physics, they get really concerned with the fact that it's science. But in reality, I want to point out that we are all scientists. When you were learning to walk, did you fall down a lot? And then you ran an experiment, changed something, and learned something new. You were acting like a scientist. Or I'm sure when you watched your kids eat ice cream at their first year birthday, they just mashed it in their mouth. But after a while, you start to learn things because you run experiments. I just want to point out that science is just a very specific way of learning. So in my science class, you don't need too many things. There are a couple things. The first is we take notes in a notebook. A single spiral-bound notebook will work, or loose leaf paper in a 3-ring binder. You will need a scientific calculator in my class. Now the TI Inspire is required from some classes, but it is not necessary. Any calculator that has a square root, and scientific notation, along with add, subtract, multiply, and divide will work. I have found the TI series for about $13 at Walmart. And I think that using pencils over pens is a very good way to engage in my class. I tend to color code things, so if your son or daughter has a red, green, and a blue pencil, they'll be ahead of the game. Some things that Highland Park High School supplies is a digital electronic textbook called Conceptual Physics. And along with that is the Mastering Physics website. Now I use this as kind of the questions at the back of the chapter. Pivot is another electronic resource that we have purchased for your son or daughter. And then finally, these physics kits, which a vast majority of my students have. They have a tennis ball in them, some popsicle sticks, but more importantly, a fabric measuring tape in meters is in that kit. I know what they have then. How is it that Fay runs his class? Here comes the kind of nuts and bolts. I take attendance 3 times a week. I see all of your students on Monday, and I see this as kind of a wellness check. I just kind of want to see your students, make sure they're healthy and ready to go. During that Monday, I will offer lectures or activities, and it may be in the form of YouTubes, which you're going to find I like a lot. Meeting number 2 is another opportunity for a lecture or practice. And then meeting number 3, I like to run laboratories as often as possible. It can be difficult in the remote environment, but I'm trying my best to get your son or daughter away from screens for at least a portion of my class. So all of these days are required. But I'd like to announce that my office hours are at 3:05 on Thursday, and they are optional. If your son or daughter needs some tutoring, this is a free resource that Highland Park High School is offering you in order to help them. What does attendance look like? I call roll at the beginning of each Zoom meeting, and I want to see your son or daughter, and I want them to say that they're here. Throughout the course of the class, I may take polls or exit slips. Sometimes I ask them to turn on their camera and give me a thumbs up. I call this a Caesar. And sometimes I call upon them with the hat, which means that I pull a name out of a hat, and that helps me judge. All of these things together help me judge whether you're attending my class. Now I've found that remote learning can be confusing, and there are internet problems and all of those things. I am flexible if you communicate with me. I'll make a record that your child has had difficulty, but I can list it in the attendance software. Just because your son or daughter is sitting in front of the computer does not necessarily mean that they're engaged. So in this whole process, I am trying to assess engagement as well. Does your son or daughter have their camera on? Are they reacting to me? Are they turning on their cameras and giving me thumbs up when I ask, give me a Caesar? Are they chatting in the text box or participating in breakout rooms? Do I get any response from prompts? And are they completing activities in my virtual classroom? All of these together help me judge if your student is engaging in my class. Listen, for young adults, this digital thing can be very hard. For adults, this digital thing can be very hard. It's hard to do all the time, and I completely understand if my students are zoning out once in a while. But I'm looking for patterns. Is your son or daughter always disengaged, or is it just one particular moment in time? Now, I do have some expectations, but to be honest, I cannot compel people to do this. These are my suggestions for your students. Number one, be present. Hey, this is really hard to do. And being on a Zoom call for an hour at a time, it takes practice. If I could ask that you get the cell phones away from your students, I would really appreciate it. They are weapons of mass distraction. They are designed to take attention away from me. If you are gaming, if their Xbox is right there, let's be honest, your students are not with me. And if possible, if your students could sit up at a desk or on the floor, it leads to better engagement. If your son or daughter is lying on their bed, they are really comfortable, which is good, but kind of my enemy. To be engaged, I would like to see your children do what I am doing in class. Write notes as they come. Practice math during the virtual period. Talk to Mr. Fay even when their mic isn't on. Hey, I don't hear it, but the act of talking to me help. How about your breakout room mates when I put them in small groups? Okay, grades. Now, the whole methodology of grading is changing during remote. But yes, your son or daughter is going to have grades. Things like homework or labs, projects, or quizzes. They took their first quiz on Friday. And I put these ones in blue just so that I could group them together. These activities are going to be few points, mainly for completion, only a couple points here and there for right and wrong, and everything for homework, labs, projects, and quizzes, I consider open note. Anything that they've written down in their notebook is fair game. If they use a digital way of taking notes, that's fair game as well. The semester exam, we kind of change. And now we are looking at more correctness. What have they learned? It's going to be for more points, and things are going to be correct or incorrect. While I would love students to be able to engage with all of my activities digitally the way in which I do it, by far the best way that I am going to judge understanding is to talk to your son or daughter. If in my conversation I can glean that they understand what they're talking about, I can judge their grade much better. And so at some point, my professional judgment is going to come into play. I use the Zoom platform, and my students are beginning to get very comfortable with Zoom, and I use breakout rooms to allow students to start to engage each other. This is one way in which we build our community. Speaking of community, you're going to find that I want to play games as often as possible. And maybe your son or daughter has this app on their phone. Do you want to join the fun? I've built a parent's edition of Goose Chase, which is an application you can get in the Google Play Store or the iTunes Store. Once it's installed, all you need is this code in order to play. I've opened up this game at 3 o'clock on Tuesday, September 8th, and it will run until Friday, September 8th at 3 o'clock. Do you think you can do better than your students? Because they ran this game last week. I hope that by explaining how I run my class, I kind of lower the anxiety level for you and your children. Once again, please feel free to contact me at my email address if you have any questions. Good luck.